Pour yourself a cup of something warm, find a soft chair, and let the noise of the outside world fade away. Tonight we are not looking up at the heavens. Tonight we are going to do something that requires a brave heart and a curious spirit. We are embarking on a journey through the architecture of the afterlife. Specifically, we are going to explore the 7 distinct levels or dimensions of the biblical underworld. This is not a journey to scare you, though some parts will be terrifying. This is a journey to understand the immense value of your soul. We are going to peel back thousands of years of history, linguistics, and theology to see what the ancients really believed happened when a person closed their eyes for the last time. So, if you are ready, let us begin our descent. To understand the underworld, we cannot start with fire and brimstone. We have to start with silence. We have to start with the dust. This brings us to the first and most ancient level of our tour, a place the Hebrew Bible calls Sheol. Imagine you are standing in the middle of a vast, arid desert in the ancient Near East, 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. The sun is beating down on the sand. When the ancient Israelites looked at the world, they saw it in 3 tiers. There were the heavens above, the earth beneath our feet, and then, deep down in the roots of the mountains, there was Sheol. In this first dimension, Sheol is not yet a place of torture. It is the great equalizer. It is the house of meeting for all the living. In the earliest pages of the Bible, when a patriarch like Jacob or a king like David spoke of death, they did not speak of floating on clouds. They spoke of going down to Sheol to sleep with their fathers. Picture a colossal subterranean cavern. It is a place of shadows. It is damp, dark, and still. In this ancient mindset, death was a fading away. It was a place where kings and slaves, rich and poor, the righteous and the wicked, all went to the same place. They were stripped of their earthly glory. The king left his crown at the grave. The warrior left his sword. They all became what the Bible calls Rephaim, or shadows. This first level is terrifying, not because of pain, but because of its emptiness. The book of Ecclesiastes describes it hauntingly. It says there is no work, no thought, no knowledge, and no wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going. It is a realm of suspension. It represents the tragedy of mortality. It reminds us that we are made of dust, and without the breath of God we return to the silence. Can you feel the heavy melancholy of this place? It is a monochrome world. There is no praise music there. As Psalm 6 says, in death there is no remembrance of you. In Sheol who will give you praise? This was the great fear of the ancient poets. Not that they would burn, but that they would be forgotten, that their voices would be swallowed by the silence. But as the centuries passed, the revelation of God began to sharpen. The gray mist of Sheol began to clear, and we started to see that the underworld was not just one big room. It had geography. It had divisions. This brings us to the second level of our tour, which the New Testament calls Hades. Now we must be careful here. In our modern minds, when we hear Hades, we think of the Greek god with the 3-headed dog. But the biblical writers used this word to describe the holding place. As we step into this second dimension, the atmosphere shifts. We are no longer just sleeping in the dust. We are now conscious. We are aware. In the time of Jesus, the understanding of the afterlife had evolved. They began to see that Sheol, or Hades, was divided into 2 distinct chambers. Imagine a massive dungeon, but on one side there is a place of relative comfort and on the other a place of distress. Jesus pulls back the curtain on this reality in the Gospel of Luke. He tells us a story about 2 men. One is a rich man, dressed in purple and fine linen, living in luxury every day. The other is a beggar named Lazarus, covered in sores, longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Both men die. But here is where the shock comes. They don't just vanish into the gray silence we talked about earlier. They wake up. In this second level, we see the introduction of the great separation. Lazarus is carried by angels to a place called Abraham's bosom. This was the section of Hades reserved for the righteous. It is a place of rest, a place of comfort, waiting for the Messiah. But the rich man, He wakes up in the other part of Hades. And notice this. He is not yet in the final lake of fire. He is in the holding cell. But even here, there is torment. This level teaches us something profound about the human soul. Death strips you of your body, but it does not strip you of your desires, your memories, or your character. The rich man is still arrogant. He still sees Lazarus as a servant. He asks Father Abraham to send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool his tongue. Think about the psychology of that moment. He is in agony, yet he still thinks he is the master. He still thinks the world revolves around him. This second level of the underworld is the place where the illusions of our life are stripped away, and we are left with the raw reality of who we have become. There is a great chasm fixed between these two sides. It is a canyon that cannot be bridged. It represents the finality of our choices. We build bridges or we burn them while we are alive. In this place, the landscape is set. So in this first part of our journey, we have walked through the dusty silence of the Old Testament Sheol, and we have stepped into the waiting rooms of the New Testament Hades. We have seen the gray shadows turn into conscious souls. We have seen that death is not the end of the story, but the turning of a page into a new, more vivid chapter. But my friends, the journey is about to get much darker. We are standing at the edge of the human realm, but beneath us, locked in chains of gloomy darkness, lies a prison designed not for humans, but for angels. A place so deep and so terrifying that it has its own special name in the Greek language. To understand the cosmic weight of rebellion, we must go deeper. We must descend into the prison of the fallen gods. But to hear the rattling of those ancient chains, you will have to join me in the next part of our story. Part 2. The Chains of Angels and the Valley of Smoke. If you were with us in the last part, we stood at the edge of the human afterlife. We looked into the gray silence of Sheol and we saw the waiting rooms of Hades where souls wait for judgment. But now we must tighten our grip on the torch and go deeper. We are leaving the realm of human history and stepping into something far older, something cosmic. We are entering the third dimension of our tour. The Bible calls this place Tartarus. This is a word that appears only once in the entire New Testament, written by the fisherman St. Peter. But the weight of this word is enough to crack the floor of the earth. When Peter wrote his second letter, he spoke of angels who sinned. He said God did not spare them, but cast them down to Tartarus and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness. I want you to let your imagination expand for a moment. We are leaving the dusty caves of human ancestors and entering a maximum security prison designed for celestial beings. The word Tartarus actually comes from ancient Greek mythology. To the Greeks, Tartarus was the deepest abyss, as far beneath Hades as the earth is beneath the sky. It was the dungeon where the Titans, the old chaotic gods, were imprisoned. Peter uses this terrifying image to describe a spiritual reality. In this third level, the atmosphere is not fire. It is darkness, but not just the absence of light. The scripture calls it chains of gloomy darkness. Think of a darkness so thick, so heavy, that it acts like a physical weight. It is a place of absolute restraint. Who is here? These are the beings of immense power who, in the ancient mists of history, crossed a forbidden line. The book of Jude tells us they are the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling. These are the architects of chaos, and now they are bound. This level teaches us a frightening lesson about the universe. It tells us that raw power, without submission to God, ends in bondage. It tells us that there is a basement in the cosmos where evil is put in handcuffs. It is a cold, silent, and heavy place. It is the waiting room for the final trial of the gods. But now, my friends, I need you to brace yourselves. We are going to leave this cold, spiritual abyss and travel to a place that is hot, visceral, and terrifyingly real. We are going to travel to the fourth dimension of hell. We are going to the Valley of Gehenna. To understand this, we have to leave the spiritual realm and step onto the soil of the earth. We are walking just outside the southern walls of ancient Jerusalem. When Jesus of Nazareth wanted to warn people about the danger of losing their souls, he did not use abstract theological words. He pointed his finger toward a specific valley that everyone knew. He used the word Gehenna. Let me paint the scene for you. Centuries before Jesus, this ravine, the Valley of Hinnom, was a place of nightmares. It was here that the ancient Israelites fell into the worship of a dark idol named Molech. Molech was a statue of bronze shaped like a man with the head of a bull. They would heat this statue with fire until it glowed red hot. And here in this valley, parents would sacrifice their own children to the fire, hoping to buy prosperity and power. The screams in this valley were so loud that they would beat drums to drown them out. It was a place soaked in innocent blood. It was the absolute depth of human depravity. Later in history, the good King Josiah tore down these altars to ensure that no one would ever worship there again. He defiled the valley. He turned it into the city garbage dump. So by the time Jesus is teaching, Gehenna is no longer a shrine. It is a smoldering wasteland. Close your eyes and try to smell it. This is the fourth level. It is the smell of burning trash. It is the smell of sulfur and decay. Into this valley, the city threw its refuse. They threw the carcasses of dead animals. They threw the bodies of criminals who were not given a proper burial. And because there was so much trash, fires were kept burning day and night, constantly consuming the waste. This is where Jesus gets the imagery that has haunted us for 2,000 years. He described it as the place where their worm does not die, and the fire is not quenched. Think about that image. The worm, or the maggot, works from the inside out, eating the rotting flesh. The fire works from the outside in, consuming the trash. It is a picture of total corruption. When the Bible speaks of Gehenna, it is speaking of the cosmic trash heap. It suggests that hell is the destination for a life that has wasted itself. A life that was created to be a vessel of gold for the king's table but chose instead to become toxic waste. God does not send people there because he is petty. People end up there because they have become like the refuse of the valley, corroded by hatred, eaten by the worms of envy and greed, and burned by the fires of their own lusts. It is a place of ruin. It is the tragedy of something beautiful that has been twisted until it is no longer recognizable. We have now seen the cold prison of the dark angels, and we have smelled the smoke of the burning valley. But the horror of the underworld is not just about chains or fire. It is about something far more personal. It is about the agony of the mind and the heart. What happens when the party is over? The doors are locked, and you realize you are standing on the wrong side of the wall. To understand the psychological torture of the afterlife, we must travel to the fifth level. We must face the outer darkness. But to open that door, you will have to join me in the next part of our journey. Part 3. The Exile into Darkness and the Lake of Fire. We have been deep underground in the silence of the grave, and we have walked through the smoldering smoke of the Valley of Gehenna. But now the scenery changes again. We are leaving the physical stench of burning trash and entering a realm that is perhaps even more terrifying, because it is purely psychological. It is the realm of the mind and the heart. We are entering the fifth dimension of our tour. The Bible calls this place the outer darkness. To understand this level, you have to let go of the images of fire for a moment, and instead imagine the biting cold of absolute isolation. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells a haunting parable about a wedding feast. Picture the scene. It is night in the ancient world. Inside the king's banquet hall there is light. There is the smell of roasting lamb, the sound of laughter, the clinking of wine goblets, and the warmth of community. It is a place of total joy and belonging. This represents the kingdom of heaven. But then Jesus speaks of a man who is thrown out. The command is chilling. Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness. This fifth level is the realization that you are on the wrong side of the door. The Greek phrase used here describes a darkness that is outside the city walls, away from the fires of the home. It is the void of exclusion. And what is the sound of this place? Jesus says there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. We often hear this as just a description of pain, but listen closer. Weeping is the sound of sorrow. the tragic realization of what could have been. It is the eternal regret of knowing you were invited to the party, but you refused to come on the king's terms. But the gnashing of teeth. In the ancient Near East, men did not gnash their teeth when they were sad. They gnashed their teeth when they were angry. This is the sound of bitter resentment. It is the sound of an ego that refuses to bow. This level of hell reveals that the torment is not just inflicted from the outside. It comes from within. It is the furious anger of a soul that wants to be its own God, even if it means sitting alone in the dark forever. It is the ultimate loneliness. It is the realization that you have built a wall around your heart so thick that now not even the light of the banquet can get in. But the Bible pushes the timeline forward. We are moving from the personal tragedy of the outer darkness to the cosmic conclusion of history. We are walking toward the horizon of the end times. We have arrived at the sixth dimension. This is the lake of fire, also known as the second death. We must turn the pages to the book of Revelation. Here, the imagery shifts from a valley or a dungeon to something volcanic. The Apostle John sees a lake burning with sulfur. This is the hardest part of our journey to comprehend. This is not a temporary holding cell like Hades. This is the final destination. But I want you to notice something profound that often gets missed. The scripture says that death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. Think about that. How can you throw death into a fire? This tells us that the lake of fire is not just a torture chamber for people. It is a cosmic quarantine zone. It is the destruction of destruction itself. God is creating a new heaven and a new earth, a place where there will be no more tears and no more pain. For that world to exist, everything that causes pain, everything that causes death, and every will that obstinately chooses evil must be permanently removed. The lake of fire is the place where the cancer of rebellion is finally cut out of the universe so that the body of creation can heal. It is called the second death because it is the final severance from the source of life. If God is life, then this place is the absolute absence of that sustaining power. It is a fire that consumes but never finishes because the rebellion of the spirit is eternal. It is a sobering, terrifying picture. It represents the no of God to everything that hurts his children. It is the final lock on the door of history. But my friends, we have one more level to explore, the deepest level, the theological core of what makes hell hell. And then, we must talk about the one person who found a way to break these gates down. To understand the ultimate void and the ultimate victory, you must stay with me. The journey is darkest just before the dawn. Join me in the next part, as we descend to the very bottom, and then look up to see a great light. Part 4. The Absolute Void and the Breaking of the Gates. If you are still with me, you have walked through the silence of the grave, the fire of the valley, and the weeping of the outer darkness. We have reached the edge of what the human mind can comprehend, but there is one final terrifying drop before we can begin our ascent. We have arrived at the seventh and deepest dimension of our tour. I call this the Absolute Void. This level is not defined by fire or worms or chains. It is defined by something far worse. It is defined by absence. The Apostle Paul, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, gives us the most chilling definition of hell in the entire Bible. He writes that they will suffer the punishment of eternal destruction, away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might. Let us pause and think about what that means. Away from the presence of the Lord. You see, right now, even in a fallen world, we are swimming in the goodness of God. Theologians call this common grace. The air you breathe is a gift. The taste of a cold drink of water is a gift. The feeling of friendship, the beauty of a sunset, the logic of mathematics, these are all reflections of God's character. Even the most hardened atheist lives in a world that is held together by God's power. But this seventh level is the withdrawal of that grace. Imagine a place where God removes his hand completely. If God is light, this place is absolute darkness. If God is love, this place is absolute indifference. If God is order, this place is absolute chaos. In this void, the soul is left entirely alone with itself. C.S. Lewis, the great Christian thinker, once said that hell is simply the end of the human demand to be left alone. It is God finally saying to the rebellious soul, "Thy will be done." This is the bottom of the abyss. It is the black hole of the spirit, where the personality collapses in on itself, forever severed from the source of all life and joy. It is the ultimate tragedy of a created being, losing its connection to its creator. The weight of this is suffocating, isn't it? Standing here at the bottom of the universe, it feels like hope is impossible. The gates are shut. The chasm is fixed. The darkness is total. But my friends, the story does not end in the dark. Just when the silence seems absolute, there is a sound of footsteps. We must now shift our gaze from the geography of hell to a specific moment in history that changed everything. We need to talk about the harrowing. The timeline is Holy Saturday, the day between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. On earth, the body of Jesus of Nazareth lies cold and stiff in a rock-hewn tomb. A heavy stone blocks the entrance. The disciples are weeping. To the human eye, death has won. The silence of Sheol has claimed the Son of God. But the Apostle Peter pulls back the veil on what was happening in the spiritual realm. He writes that Jesus went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. Imagine this. For thousands of years, the underworld was a fortress that no one could break out of. It swallowed kings and prophets alike. It was the undefeated champion. But suddenly, a tremor shakes the foundations of the deep. It is not an earthquake of rock. It is an earthquake of holiness. Into this realm of gray shadows steps a light that is blinding. The soul of Christ, separated from his body, but united with his divinity, descends into the dark. He does not come as a victim. He comes as a conqueror. The ancient church fathers loved to preach on this moment. They pictured Jesus kicking down the bronze gates of Hades. They pictured the light shattering the darkness of the dungeon. He goes to that section of Hades we talked about, Abraham's bosom, where the faithful souls had been waiting, and he announces the victory. The scripture says in Ephesians that when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives. This suggests a massive jailbreak. Jesus descends into the lower regions not to stay, but to take the keys. Revelation describes Jesus standing in glory saying, "I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades." This changes everything. It means that the underworld is no longer a sovereign kingdom of evil. It is occupied territory. The strong man has been bound, and his house has been plundered. Standing here, in the light of this victory, the terror of the 7 levels begins to fade, replaced by a sense of awe. The abyss is deep, yes, but the love of God has dived deeper. So we have seen the horror and we have seen the hero. But the question remains, what does this mean for you and me right now, in the 21st century? How do we navigate these realities in our daily lives? To answer that, we must ascend back to the surface for our final reflection. Join me for the last part of our journey, where we will bring this all home. Part 5. The Dignity of Choice and the Way Home. Welcome back to the surface, my friends. Take a deep breath. Can you feel that? The fresh air, the warmth of the sun, the sound of life happening around you. After walking through the silence of the grave, the smoke of the valley, and the cold of the void, the simple gift of being alive feels different, doesn't it? We have completed our tour. We have descended through the 7 layers of the biblical underworld. We have looked at the hard reality of Sheol, Hades, Tartarus, Gehenna, the outer darkness, the lake of fire, and the absolute void. But now, as we stand here at the end of the road, we have to answer the most important question of all. Why? Why does the Bible paint such terrifying pictures? Is it just to scare us into submission? Is it the threat of a tyrant? No. I believe the answer is exactly the opposite. The existence of hell is actually a testament to the immense dignity of the human soul. Think about it. If there were no consequences for your actions, if everyone ended up in the same place regardless of how they lived, then your choices wouldn't really matter. History would be a meaningless play where the script is already written. But the biblical worldview says, you matter. Your choices matter. You are not a robot. You are a creature made in the image of God, endowed with the terrifying power to say yes or no to your Creator. Hell, in its deepest reality, is God's ultimate respect for that power. As we discussed, the doors of hell are locked from the inside. It is the final monument to human freedom. It is God saying, I love you too much to force you to be with me, if you do not want to be. So, the landscape we have explored is not a torture chamber built by hate. It is the destination of a trajectory. Every day, with every small choice, you are turning your soul into something. Every time you hold on to a grudge, every time you choose greed over generosity, every time you choose pride over humility, you are taking a small step toward the outer darkness. You are making yourself into a creature that cannot tolerate the light. But the opposite is also true. And this is the beautiful news I want to leave you with. Every time you choose to forgive when you don't want to, every time you help a stranger, every time you whisper a prayer of gratitude, you are taking a step toward the wedding feast. You are preparing your eyes to see the King in his beauty. The Bible ends not with a picture of the pit, but with a picture of a city, the New Jerusalem. Its gates are never shut. The Spirit and the bride say, Come, and let the one who hears say, Come, and let the one who is thirsty, come. The invitation is open. The bridge has been built. The conqueror who broke the gates of Hades is standing with his arms wide open. So, my dear friends, as you turn off this audio and go back to your life, to your job, your family, your struggles, remember where you are walking. You are walking on holy ground. You are a creature destined for eternity. Do not let your life become the trash of Gehenna. Do not let your heart become the ice of the void. Choose life. Choose life. Choose life. Choose life. While it is still day, thank you for having the courage to take this dark journey with me. It has been an honor to be your guide. My prayer for you is simple. May you never see the places we described. May your road lead you straight to the heart of the Father. Until we meet again, walk in the light, and Godspeed.